Hey you, do you hate waiting 20 minutes in Mythic plus queues to join someone else's key that ends up failing anyways? Are you also too scared to make your own group because you don't know what to bring? Well, this is the perfect video for you. This is a checklist of what to bring and what not to bring to your PUGs. This video is not affected by the current Mythic plus meta. Enjoy. Now, to start off this checklist, what you really need in Mythic plus is an interrupt that's under 24 seconds. Things like Shadow Priests don't bring interrupts. All they have is a silence every 45 seconds, which doesn't really help them out a lot. You need to bring at least a one lust class, such as Shaman, Hunter, and Mage. You also want to bring Oh Shit CC, aka Emergency CC, AoE CC preferably, and then at least one Soothe and a Cleanse. Let's talk about the classes and the important things that they bring. Starting off with my favorite class, DK. DK's bring AMZ is a group-wide cooldown that can help the group take reduced damage in specific situations. It only blocks magic damage. It does not work against physical damage, so it is not useful in all situations. Another really important thing that DKs bring is a B-Res. B-Reses are very important in boss fights to prevent wipes. Typically we use B-Reses on healers and tanks if they die. DKs also bring a ranged interrupt, which is very good. Being able to interrupt from a short distance can be very important on getting an interrupt off on a caster, especially if grip is down. Which brings me to the next thing that they bring, a grip. If a DK knows how to use grip, that's great. DKs bring a decent amount of utility, but next we're moving on to Monk. Monks bring Ring of Peace, which makes mobs not able to go in a certain spot and prevents them from walking into it. They also bring an interrupt. They have a high mobility along with the interrupt, which could really help interrupt casters as well. They have a lot of uncapped damage. They bring a cleanse. They have paralysis. They also have an execute, a slow. They bring an AoE stun, and they also bring a bonus physical damage to everyone. So with a melee comp, they can be very, very good. Monks are very good when they're able to do high amounts of damage, but not the greatest whenever they're low damage. Moving on to the 2-button weeb edgy class, the Demon Hunter. They bring a Soothe, a ranged interrupt, as I said was very good. They could bring an AoE stun, a single target stun, and also an imprison, which works just like paralysis. They're very easy to play, so it's pretty hard for them to fuck up. They also bring bonus magic damage, which can be very useful for classes like Mage and Lock. Havoc Demon Hunters also bring Darkness, a group-wide defensive just like AMZ, more useful in more situations. Hopefully your soy boy Demon Hunter knows how to use it. Moving on to Warlocks, they can bring Banish, which only works on certain targets. They're pretty tanky. They bring an AoE stun. They also have an interrupt on a pretty long CD, but it interrupts gates, which can be used to skips. Sometimes, not all the times though. They also bring rocks, which is very important for survivability for everybody. And they also bring, as well, a B-Res. Warriors are a cleave class. They do a lot of damage in melee AoE. They bring a slow. They have an AoE fear, which can be used to interrupt. They have an interrupt. They also bring Rallying Cry, very similar to an AMZ. It's a group-wide defensive ability. They bring Spell Reflect, which they can't really use very often, but it's very useful whenever there's a random targeted ability from a mob. They also bring a single target stun if they talented into it, and they're really good at execute. They also bring Battle Shout, which is also very good for melee specs. Warriors also bring a melee interrupt. Rogues, they bring fucking everything besides a B-Res, pretty much. They have Blind. They have Cloak, which can help them soak things. They have an aggro dropper, Tricks of Trade. They have an interrupt. They have multiple single target stuns. They bring healing reduction if they need to. They have a Soothe. They have an AoE invis for God's sake. Sub can bring a lot of uncapped damage, and Outlaw can bring a lot of cleave damage. They can pretty much perma-CC any mob that needs to be CC'd, and they also have a shit ton of mobility, and they have an invis, which they can use as set targets, which can help you skip. Rogues bring Kick, which is an interrupt. Rogues are probably the strongest Mythic Plus DPS class. I highly recommend them to anyone who wants to get into Mythic Plus, because usually they're consistently the best. Hunter is another good class. They bring an aggro dropper. They have decent mobility. They bring freezing traps, which could be helped to skip. They have a tricks as well, which helps them drop aggro. They bring a soothe. They also have an AoE slow, an AoE root. They have a ranged interrupt, which can be very important. And they also bring lust with a certain pet. A certain specialization of a pet brings lust. You can tell they have the right pet out if they have a leech buff on them. They also bring a 24-second cooldown ranged interrupt, which is really good at interrupting casters, unless they are survival, which is just another melee interrupt that has a 15-second cooldown. Now Druids, they have bear form, which can help soak. They have decent mobility. They can bring Cyclone to CC a mob. They have a single target stun. They have an invis. They have a B-res. They have a soothe. They can bring Stampeding War. Boomkins have Innervate, which can help the healer receive mana during a long boss fight. They can off-heal pretty well. Solar Beam, which is Boomy specific. They also bring a Cleanse. Typhoon, which is Boomy specific as well. Vortex. And Ferals bring a stun. Feral and Bear Tank also bring Skull Bash, which is a single target interrupt. My favorite class to joke around with, Paladin. Paladins bring Freedom, which can help teammates get out of shit when they're slowed. Bubbles, which can immune their teammates or themselves. Blessing of Sacrifice, which tanks usually use on healers or DPS when they're about to get hit by a random targeted ability. They also bring Diva Aura, which is a constant damage reduction ability, single target stun, or an AoE incapacitate, a little bit of off healing, an execute, lay on hands, which is another oh shit button, cleanse, and an interrupt. Paladins also bring a single target stun. Shaman is another great class to main. They bring a self B-res. They bring lust, which is very important. You always need to bring a lust to the group. LA Shaman is uncapped damage. They bring Hex, which can help skips. Purge, which can help take magical effects off enemies. Tremor Totem, which can be useful in some bosses and against some mobs. A 12-second interrupt. And by 12-second interrupt, I mean a 12-second cooldown on an interrupt, which is the lowest cooldown for an interrupt in the game. Enhancement brings Winfrey Totem, which is really good for melee comps, especially for Arms Warrior and Sub Rogue. They bring a Cleanse, which is very important, and then the healers, Resto Shaman, brings Spirit Link, the strongest healing team-wide cooldown in the game. With Priests, I'm mostly going to be talking about Shadow Priest. They can bring off healing with Vampiric Embrace. They also have a Disperse, which can be really useful. They have a Cleanse. They have a Burst. They have Burst every 1 minute and 30 seconds. They bring a Silence. Sadly, they don't have an actual interrupt, which is one of their major downsides, but they do bring a Mass Dispel and a single target Dispel. They can also drop aggro, if they can even get aggro. Fortified, which gives the entire party stamina, a shield, an AoE fear, a slow, and a mind soothe, and PI, which can be very useful on Warlocks. Mage is another spec that's regarded as a good one for Mythic Plus. They bring party-wide food, Frost Nova, Ice Block, Invis, Mirror Image, Sheep, which can be useful, Curse, they can remove curses, they can spell seal from certain mobs. They also bring a Lust, which is another must need for your group. Frost can perma-slow, and also bring 2 blocks. Fire Mage can bring an AoE interrupt, and can also cast while moving. Arcane brings Mana Gem, and a Mass Invis. All very good things. Also, all forms of this class bring a ranged interrupt on I believe, an 18-second cooldown. Mage is another class I always recommend to players wanting to get into Mythic Plus, because there's always at least one spec that's really good. Deadly Boss Mobs, also known as DBM, is an add-on when you have it updated that'll tell you when bad mechanics are coming, shows warnings on screens for them. It's as simple as installing and then playing the game. No extra settings you have to mess with. Install and then you game. Details is a widely used combat log tracker. Shows you all kinds of different information, such as damage, DPS, healing dealt, interrupts, death recap, and much more. Also tells you and the other teammates that you're much better than them, so you can flex on them and the squads. Omni CD helps you track your allies' cooldowns to figure out how much you should pull as a tank and how much you need to focus to tank as a healer when his CDs are down. Highly recommend this if you are a tank or a healer. It's not as important if you're a DPS player. Weakor is also known as WA or WA, is an add-on a lot of high-rated players use to help track all kinds of things, ranging from cooldowns, debuffs, personal buffs, personal debuffs, boss mechanics, and much more. Highly recommend this add-on for anyone who's planning to become high-rated within the next couple seasons, but if you're just trying to get KSM, it's really not worth it. Mythic Dungeons Tools is what allows you to see the dungeon before you even enter it. You can choose which dungeon you want to pick by going up to the top left here and selecting any single dungeon from Shadowlands that you want, and then you can choose previous expansion dungeons by going to the bottom right here by clicking the same tab and going for Battle of Azeroth and then to Legion, and choosing any dungeon that you want. Figure out pathing, add new pools. Then you can export it and give your code to your friends through the chat. You can also pick, we can go back to DOS. Then you can also choose the rooms by clicking on the doors or by just selecting them here, like Ardenwild. And you can learn a lot from this tool, especially if you're new, by just right-clicking on the mob and seeing what abilities they can cast. This little lightning bolt right here, or exclamation mark, whatever the hell it is, tells you that this ability can be interrupted. So it teaches you what to interrupt and what the abilities actually do. In the future, I'll make a more in-depth video on all these add-ons. Alright, here's the conclusion, guys. I appreciate anyone who stayed to watch until the end. I want to make a more in-depth KSM guide in the future. Also, there's another DK guide coming along soon. You can find more of my content here on YouTube, or I might be streaming over there on twitch.tv. If you have any questions, remember just to leave a comment. Bye bye.